SLT Speed Up සවාරිය සමගින් සද්දන්ත වාසි රැල්ලක්. අලුත් බ්‍රෝඩ්බෑන්ඩ් සබඳතා සඳහා පළමු මාස දෙක පුරා data double. Speed up with SLT.
Making headlines on First at 9. Delimitation post-mortem. Minister of Provincial Councils and Local Government unfazed by the delimitation report's defeat.
Every member who voted against this delimitation has consented this going to an appellate forum consisting of 5 persons.
The UFP, however, have other ideas. Together in grief, President Maithripala Sirisena attends former president's brother's funeral. Heading towards self-sufficiency. Government's big plans for the agricultural sector.
If we maintain the said growth rate, we will be able to increase the total export to 30 billion by 2025.
Not worth it. The US President halts Mike Pompeo's planned trip to North Korea. £50 for a day's cricket. Ticket prices for the England's tour of Sri Lanka cause a stir.
So actually, minister should interfere and stop this nonsense actually.
I also have been informed that there is an issue about it. There is some seriousness in it.
A very good evening to you and welcome to First at 9 on Derana 24/7 Sri Lanka's news channel. I'm Katharina Chang. Now moving on to a top story tonight, the delimitation report pertaining to the provincial council elections was defeated in Parliament yesterday without a single vote in favour. One of the defining factors of the vote was that Subject Minister Faisal Mustafa also voting against the report. Speaking to First at 9 today, Minister Mustafa insisted that although the delimitation report was defeated, there is no chance of the looming election being held under the previous electoral system. In contrast, parliamentarian of the United National Party stressed their expectation to adopt the old system.
The delimitation report pertaining to the upcoming provincial council elections was defeated in Parliament yesterday without a single vote in favour. 139 parliamentarians voted against the report while no one voted in favour. The minister who tabled the report in Parliament, Faisal Mustafa, and all factions of the government, the joint opposition as well as the Tamil National Alliance, voted against the report while Janata Vimukti Peramuna refrained from voting. In the meantime, following the vote held in Parliament yesterday, the parliamentarians of the joint opposition engaged in a protest inside the House. Minister of Provincial Councils and Local Government Faisal Mustafa spoke to First at 9 today on the aftermath of yesterday's manifestations.
Unfortunately, certain persons believe that because this was defeated by 2/3, we can go back to the old system. We have to look at the legal provision. Every member who voted against this delimitation has consented this going to an appellate forum consisting of 5 persons, where the speaker has to appoint the prime minister and 4 others who within 2 months have to go into any shortcomings of the report and hand over same to His Excellency the President, and the President is obliged to forthwith gazette it, and then the delimitation report becomes law.
In the meantime, civil activists and other politicians also expressed their views on yesterday's vote on the delimitation report.
The issue is, although these political parties rejected the delimitation report, they have not come to a definite conclusion as to under which system the election should be held. If the election will not be held under the existing system, there is no use of appointing a review committee because it will be a waste of people's money. What the government wants is to postpone the election. An election should be held under whichever the system it may adopt. Therefore, we refrain from voting to defeat the report as we didn't want to aid the government's efforts to postpone elections. We can't agree to introduce systems which don't suit the country just because it's the whim of one minister. Minister Faisal isn't the president and we can't let him do what he wants. You see what happened after letting him do what he wants. The election keeps getting postponed because of what he does. Eventually, it's not him who's blamed, it's us. There were issues with the delimitation process. That's why it's defeated. We hope the committee headed by the Prime Minister will prepare a report which will do justice by the country. Accordingly, we will go for an election.
The final rites of late Chandra Rajapaksa, the brother of former President Mahinda Rajapaksa, was conducted this afternoon. President Maithripala Sirisena also arrived at the Madamulana house to pay his last respects.
Chandra Rajapaksa, a brother of former President Mahinda Rajapaksa, who had been ailing and was receiving treatment at the Tengal hospital, passed away on Tuesday. The body of late Chandra Rajapaksa was kept at Madamulana house in Veerakatiya, and President Maithripala Sirisena paid his last respects to the late brother of the former President Rajapaksa this morning. By the time President arrived, former President Mahinda Rajapaksa, former Speaker of Parliament Chamal Rajapaksa and former Defence Secretary Gotabaya Rajapaksa were also present. The final rites of the late Chandra Rajapaksa was performed at the family cemetery in Madamulana this afternoon.
UMP parliamentarian Harshana Rajakaruna insists that the United National Party cannot be singled out for blame over any economic challenges the country might be faced with. Speaking to Indivari Amawat at Hyde Park yesterday, he added that if there is any blame to be apportioned, the entire government, inclusive of the SLFP faction, should be held accountable.
Talking about the looming presidential election in 2020, there are a lot of concerns and views expressed. Some messages coming out of the UNP suggest that leader, Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe, will be the UNP's presidential candidate. But also, there isn't a denial of moving for a common candidate like the two previous occasions. But if this continues to happen as a young politician once again, how would you feel? Does it mean that the UNP will be piggybacking on popular personalities in the country?
I think the number one thing is we have to win the election. So it has to be a candidate who can get the majority. The local council election, the vote to us got 44%. So which means 56% are still against them. So we have to have a candidate that can attract that 56%. But I, yes, personally would like a UMP candidate, but 1.5 million SLFP votes is very significant when it comes to a presidential election. So it has to be a person who can get all those groups together.
But I think also the President, President Maithripala Sirisena, has blamed your party's policies at several occasions for the challenges faced in the economy.
I don't think that if he had blamed it, I think we are all to be blamed. If when it comes to a government, we are all together. He is the president, my party leader is the prime minister. He is the head of the cabinet. My party leader is the premier in the cabinet. So if we had made wrong decisions, we all have made wrong decisions. You can't blame one person and say the other person is right and the other person is wrong.
Minister of Petroleum Resources Arjuna Ranatunga expresses his determination to get involved in fixing the issues surrounding the sports of cricket in the country. Addressing media following a function held in Gampaha, the minister alleged that certain redundant politicians are destroying the game and that he is still seeking for the so-called Article 44 in the Sports Law Act.
I won't speak about cricket because Minister Pfizer knows more about cricket and law than me. So he's left to handle it since there is no need to create issues within the government. If a future government comes to power, I will resolve the issues surrounding cricket because I have a responsibility. I've said that I won't accept a sports ministerial portfolio. However, if another political leadership, if not the President or the Prime Minister, makes a request from me tomorrow to address it, I will resolve issues in cricket within 6 months. It won't be out of greed, and no one can say I cannot be involved in cricket since no one's got a greater right than me to be involved in cricket. Today the players are kept at bay and instead redundant politicians have banded together to destroy cricket. Sports ministers aid their efforts and that's a misfortune. The people will reply to those political leaders during future elections.
When I highlighted
the alleged Article 44, he says there is one. I still can't find this Article 44 and I've gone to the extent of even searching waste bins and drawers, but somehow he has 44 articles. He hasn't even corrected it anywhere, including the cabinet paper. As a member of the government, when this bill is brought to Parliament, I will rectify it since I know about sports law a bit more than Minister Pfizer.
Now, suicide is a word we hear on a day-to-day basis, with the World Health Organization coining this term as a global phenomenon. Although Sri Lanka has come a long way from being given the unwanted title of the country with the second highest suicide rate in 1995, it is evident that speaking about mental health issues is still seen as a stigma in society. We at First at 9 delved into the subject to ascertain Sri Lanka's current progress in addressing this issue and what can be done to prevent people taking their own lives.
Suicide is a global phenomenon which accounted for 1.4% of all deaths worldwide, making it the 18th leading cause of death in 2016. Approximately 800,000 people commit suicide each year, which is one person every 40 seconds. The World Health Organization has also identified suicide as being the second leading cause of death among 15 to 29-year-olds globally. In fact, 79% of suicides occurred in low and middle-income countries. In 2014, Sri Lanka was one of the top 5 countries with the highest rate of suicides, and since then, the country's rate of suicides has come down. That being said, attempts to taking one's own life is on the rise. It is evident that each year almost 3,025 people die due to suicide in Sri Lanka, with 9% of them being the youth of the country. According to recent statistics, most suicides in Sri Lanka have occurred by consumption of insecticides and pesticides, followed by asphyxiation. However, what makes Sri Lanka a vulnerable nation to this mental health issue? And are we doing enough to address the matter? First at 9 spoke to the manager of CCC Lines, Ranil Tilakaratne, to gain more clarity on the issue.
We started at NIMH. With the help of Dr. Jayan Mendis, who's like a founding father to us, and we only got like 1-2 calls per day. But today we get up to about 80 to 100 calls. So when we ask them, when we analyze the call, we realize that the number one reason for people to call us is loneliness. Right. Number 2 will be relationship issues, and number 3 will be financial issues. Right. So the main reason people call us is because they are lonely. They don't have people to talk to. They might have 500,000 friends on Facebook, but when it comes to personally talking, sharing a problem where they can't share with anyone else, they call us.
He added that speaking about mental health issues openly in society is a must to address the issue of suicide.
We don't talk about not only suicide, even about mental issues. We still don't talk about it because of the stigma attached to it. For example, I did a walk along the coast of Sri Lanka with 2 of my good friends, and we saw that there are a lot of areas in Sri Lanka where there is no proper medical help, where someone can go either to a hospital or to a DS office where they can go and meet a counselor free, because these people can't afford. We have an amazing network of hospitals in the country that we saw during the walk. So if they can have more units, There are many services in Sri Lanka. CCC line 1333 is just one. There are other services as well. They should take this upon themselves and they should advertise these services.
CCC Lines 1333 is just one organisation that saves lives, especially those vulnerable to suicide. However, Tilakaratne added that it is the responsibility of the society.
I think as a society we need to also take responsibility. We need to be available for people. We are all very busy. We've come a long way from where we are. But when we came a long way, we have left some things in the background. We have forgotten some things, right? And like the family unit, right? We don't talk to each other much. We are always on the phone. We need to be more open. We need to talk. We shouldn't talk to someone, listen to someone to answer them. We need to listen to someone to hear them. There are many instances where we've got calls. There are many instances where we've lost lives because somebody did not give 5 minutes.
USS Anchorage, which belongs to the United States Navy, arrived at the Trincomalee port recently. Over 400 US Navy sailors and 500 US Marines accompany the vessel, and they are to engage in partnership building exercises with Sri Lanka Navy and the newly formed Sri Lankan Marines.
USS Anchorage is an amphibious transport dock with 13 marine expeditionary units. The ship's crew consists of over 500 US Marines and 400 US Navy sailors. The purpose of the ship's arrival in Sri Lanka is said to be to grow positive military-to-military relations between the two nations and to participate in partnership building exercises with Sri Lanka Navy and the newly formed Sri Lankan Marines. The training focuses on humanitarian assistance and disaster relief, interoperability as well as damage control exercises including medical training. For the first time, a female engagement team exercise for female US Marine and female Sri Lanka Navy personnel is also scheduled to be held.
Hi, my name is Major James Lindler. I'm with Battalion Landing Team 3-1, part of 13th Marine Expeditionary Unit. We're incredibly excited to be here aboard USS Anchorage and conducting training here in Sri Lanka and Trincomalee. And what I bring here with the Battalion Landing Team is a cross-section of the MEU. MEUs are organized as a Marine Air Ground Task Force where we have a command element, an aviation combat element, a ground combat element, and a logistics element. So this ship is probably one of the most premier because it has a cross-section of every single thing we do. We're also looking forward to taking away with us the experiences, the culture, and the customs here in Sri Lanka and specifically here in Trincomalee.
Buddhist devotees today observe the Nikini full moon Poya day, which also coincides with the last procession of the Asala festival of the Temple of the Sacred Tooth Relic in Kandy. The procession set off at the auspicious time of 7:58 p.m. to parade the streets of the ancient kingdom.
The final procession of this year's Asala festival, organised in line with tradition each year by the Temple of the Sacred Tooth Relic in Kandy, took to the streets today and is currently in process. Once the procession returns to the temple, another procession will set off for the Gedige temple of Asgiriya, where the sacred casket will be laid to rest. The water cutting ceremony is scheduled for tomorrow morning at the Gatambe port of the river Mahaveli, and following which, a day procession of the Temple of the Sacred Tooth Relic and the 4 Devalas at the temple will parade. Once the day procession is over, the Diyavadana Nilame of the temple, along with other trustees, will call on the President at the President's house in Kandy and hand over an epistle acknowledging the proper conduct of the procession. The President will then felicitate artists who excelled during the procession with gifts and certificates, marking the official conclusion of the Asala festival.
The 35th Derana medical camp got underway at the Veera Katya Mahavidyalaya in Hambantota today. The humanitarian initiative aims to raise awareness on kidney disease among the public.
Derana worked off its 35th medical camp in Hambantota today in order to raise awareness on kidney disease among the locals. A large number of people, even from neighbouring villages, participated in the clinic, where patients were given free medical laboratory tests at the camp to identify any possible kidney diseases. Meanwhile, the public were also given free eye consultations by the Sri Lanka Eye Donation Society. HelpAge Sri Lanka, Sri Lanka Eye Donation Society and Colombo Sedum Medical Laboratory were among those who assisted in driving this initiative. Meanwhile, in line with the Asala procession in Kandy, Derana conducted a cleaning program with the aim of keeping the sacred site clean and tidy.
You are watching Sri Lanka's award-winning news channel, Derana 24/7.
Minister of Social Welfare and Welfare on Primary Industries, Dagamage, reveals government's intentions to increase income generated through agricultural exports by 15% to 20% per annum. He expressed these views at an event held last evening.
An investor forum organised by the Federation of Chambers of Commerce and Industries in collaboration with China International Chamber of Commerce for the private sector was held last evening. The event was held under the auspices of Minister of Social Welfare and Primary Industries, Dayagamage.
Our vision is to make Sri Lanka a rich country by 2025. This is with the objective to create an environment where all citizens have the opportunity to achieve higher income and better standard of living. To realize this, we must create the condition which will generate a rapid economic growth in the country. The industrial development in the key components, Sri Lanka will have a flourishing industry sector growing at a rate of more than 15% per annum in the coming years. I believe the promotion of commercial agriculture has a lot of potential for export promotion as well as enhance the livelihood of people. During the next 2 years, my ministry will establish 5,500 export production villages in 300 divisional secretary divisions in the country. The export income from these villages has been estimated to $7 to 9 billion per annum. Employment for about 500,000 persons will be generated. In view of the present trend in the export sector, the sector records more than 10% growth since 2015. We need to increase this rate to 15 to 20% per annum during the coming years, as we are working to reach the export income of $25 billion per annum by 2025. If we maintain the said growth rate, we will be able to increase the total export to $30 billion by 2025.
Even though the present trade war between China and the United States has posed certain challenges, China has still been able to maintain 6% growth rate. A key contributor to this economic stability is the strong economic ties which have been maintained with countries like Sri Lanka. In order to further improve Sri Lanka-China bilateral ties, commitment is required between its governments and people.
U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo will not be traveling to North Korea in the immediate future after President Donald Trump asked him to call off a planned trip. The president tweeted that insufficient progress was being made in dismantling Pyongyang's nuclear program. He also suggested China was not doing enough to put pressure on North Korea due to tensions with the United States.
US President Donald Trump has cancelled Secretary of State Mike Pompeo's planned trip to North Korea because of insufficient progress towards the goal of denuclearizing the Korean peninsula. Trump said in a message on Twitter that Pompeo's visit, which was set for next week, now would likely not take place until after Washington has resolved its trade dispute with China. Trump said China was no longer helping on the North Korea issue. It was a dramatic shift of tone for Trump, who had previously hailed his June summit with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un as a success and said the North Korean nuclear threat was over. Trump said on Twitter, quote, "I have asked Secretary of State Mike Pompeo not to go to North Korea at this time because I feel we are not making sufficient progress with respect to the denuclearization of the Korean peninsula," unquote. Negotiations have stalled since the June summit in Singapore. Pompeo is pressing for tangible steps towards North Korea's abandonment of its nuclear arsenal, while Pyongyang is demanding that Washington first make concessions of its own.
You are watching Sri Lanka's premier news channel, Derana 24/7.
Sheila Fernando is at the Derana Weather Centre with your forecast first evening edition.
A very good evening to our viewers and welcome to Forecast First. Starting off with your temperatures for tomorrow, that to vary between 20 and 35 degrees Celsius, with the highest of 35 expected in Batticaloa. Well, when looking at the map, a low pressure zone will develop in the western province and will gradually disappear. Well, moving on to your rain forecast for tomorrow, most parts of the upper region of the country, including Vaunia, Anuradhapura and Trincomalee, will experience showers with thunder activity also expected. It is the same scenario in the lower region of the island as well, as most parts including Kandy, Colombo, Galle and Matara as well as Hambantota will experience the wet weather. That's all we have from the Weather Centre tonight. Up next is your city by city forecast.
And with that, we conclude this edition of First at 9. Thank you for joining us and have a pleasant evening.